just because you can beat him up doesn't give you the right to. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Welcome back to Director's Choice. Comic books brought superheroes to our imaginations, and cinematic interpretations brought them to life. From animations to TV shows and movies, almost every superhero and their supporting characters straight off comic series has had some screen time. Marvel's Spider-Man was one of the first superhero characters to move from the pages of comic books to the main screens. He made his first on-screen appearance in the original Spider-Man cartoon back in 1967, just 5 years after his comic debut. And like other famous special-powered characters from comic books, the web-spinning hero got different role interpretations, settings, missions, and of course actors. Today, we are going over every major version of Spider-Man that has graced the big screens, and some small ones. We will be ranking our selection from the worst to the best. So make sure you watch till the end for a shocking reveal of the Director's Choice top Spider-Man version of all time. Now, let's begin. 10. The Amazing SpiderMan 1 and 2, 2012-2014. Bringing in the rear of our countdown is the second live-action version of Spider-Man. After the cancellation of Spider-Man 4, ending the reign of Tobey Maguire in 2010, works began for the creation of The Amazing Spider-Man. This movie follows Peter Parker with the origin story of Spider-Man, who seeks to uncover the mystery of his past, while trying to defeat his friend turned supervillain, the Lizard, aka Dr. Connors.
Poor Peter Parker. No mother, no father, all alone.
But despite all the promotions, including a game, this movie didn't settle well with the viewers when it was released in 2012. And neither did its 2014 sequel. The storyline of The Amazing Spider-Man was more intense than the light theme that was associated with the superhero. When it came to the climaxes, it may as well have been a remake of the first live-action Spider-Man trilogy. For most viewers, the only enjoyable part of this movie was the undeniable chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, who play Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy respectively. 9. Japanese Spider-Man, 1978 to 1979. To be honest, the reason this 70s version of Spider-Man didn't come in at the bottom is because of the cultural effort in production. As far as the storyline goes, it is far from being a Spider-Man interpretation. Well, except for the costume. This version was featured in a Japanese live-action TV series and a movie between 1978 and 1979. The Japanese Spider-Man is Takuya Yamashiro, and his powers come from being injected with a spider extract. He carries out his superhero activities completely alone, and constantly battles the Iron Cross Army in a mission to avenge the death of his father. The Japanese Spider-Man also had an elaborate entrance that includes a self-introduction to his enemies before striking a rather dramatic pose. This version also relied heavily on additional equipment to help him fight, which is just another one of the things that throw him to the bottom tier of our rankings. 8. MTV SpiderMan, 2003. This animation series came shortly after the first Spider-Man live-action film, as a form of continuation following the events of the 2002 movie. In this animated version, Peter Parker is voiced by Neil Patrick Harris. Yes, the same Neil Patrick Harris from How I Met Your Mother.
That your story? Don't you have anybody that means anything to you? If you get hurt, you get caught, what would that mean?
Now, if you haven't seen any of the episodes from the series, you can only imagine how distracting it is to try and connect the iconic voice with the character of Spider-Man. But that wasn't the only problem with this animation. The showrunners tried to create a more mature storyline for Peter Parker. They gave him the dilemma of trying to balance his personal life and relationship with Mary Jane Watson, while being a superhero in New York. While this may have seemed like a great idea, the ratings soon showed that it wasn't, and MTV had to cancel the show after just one season. 7. The first animated Spider-Man, 1967 to 1970. If you are looking for the most iconic version of Spider-Man, this is most definitely it. This is the very first cartoon series created from the comic books. As original as can be, it follows the story of Peter Parker, who was bit by a radioactive spider and gets superpowers. At the time of its release in 1967, it was the first of many comic book adaptations, so naturally it lacked in several aspects. But come on, this was pre-70s, so it is a little bit understandable.
Duplicated my web power!
While the adaptation may have lacked quality, it is still very notable in the history of Spider-Man. In fact, most of the memes about the superhero, as well as the theme song, which is still used to this day, are all from this first animated version. However, the quality of production doesn't qualify for top tier. It is still a very enjoyable version of Spider-Man, and can definitely be enjoyed by a much younger audience in the current times. 6. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, 1981 to 1986. This was the first animated version of Spider-Man that explored an unconventional storyline by bringing on supporting characters to the frontline. The superhero, who is voiced by Dan Gilvezan, fights criminals alongside Iceman and Firestar. This series is not as popular as others, but it deserves accolades for the action, comedy, and excellent voice acting by the cast.
Way to go, Spidey! About time you did something concrete.
The goofiness of the characters was portrayed within the right setting, and they were focused when they needed to be in this series that aired from 1981 to 1986. It also brilliantly showcases a partnership between Spider-Man and his fellow superhero friends.
Action! Over here, gang!
But this show doesn't make the top 5 though, because of the too far-stretched plot. Spider-Man was supposed to be a grounded character with limited resources, but in this series, he has a headquarters completely fitted with high-tech devices. Still, it ranks high enough to launch us into the top versions of Spider-Man that have been brought into the cinematic limelight. 5. SpiderMan Homecoming and Far From Home. This is the third live-action version of Spider-Man, and it really perfected everything about the role. This was the movie that successfully revived the theater franchise, something the Amazing SpiderMan terribly failed to accomplish. In this 2017 movie, the excellent casting places Tom Holland as the youngest superhero among the Avengers, and his youthful energy is represented diligently.
I was just trying to... my car!
Yo, I'm working nice. Come on, dude.
That's not your car. That's his car.
What the hell is going on?
That's not your car.
Every day with these damn alarms. Shut it off.
Don't make me come down there, you punk.
One thing that makes this version stand out is how the other characters get to have a larger part of the plot without overshadowing Peter Parker's story. In the 2019 sequel, Far From Home, the storyline is still upbeat and modern, but in the attempts to leave a bigger impact than the first movie, it fell a bit lower than expected, although it ties in beautifully with the plot of Avengers Endgame, which came out before it did. While some argue that Tom Holland is the best fit for Spider-Man, others strongly disagree and stand with Tobey Maguire. Be sure to mention what camp you belong to in the comment section below. Alright, let's get back to it. 4. Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, 2002, 2004, 2007. This is the very first high-budget live-action version of Spider-Man, and debatably the best. Tobey Maguire plays the character of Peter Parker in this adaptation of the comic books, and he remains the most accepted live-action actor of Spider-Man. This movie transformed the simple origin of the superhero into a remarkable delivery of the storyline. Although some argue that Tobey Maguire didn't really fit the character of a high school student, his goofiness came through in the end. By the time the sequel, Spider-Man 2, was released in 2004, the production had been perfected, and it would go on to be one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. But the disappointing performance of the third installation in 2007 tanks Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man as fourth best. Still, it was a defining point in cinematic history, especially with the limited sci-fi adaptation at the time. 3. The Spectacular SpiderMan, 2008 to 2009. This version of Spider-Man featured all the animation improvements by the Marvel Cinematic Universe team. And it was, as the name goes, spectacular. The writing delved more into the origin of Spider-Man, and it revolved around the theme of the education of Peter Parker. It follows Spider-Man's character as he tries to shuffle his newly acquired powers and his personal life, all at the age of 16.
No father. I'm left with no Gwen. At least the city's safe. The Green Goblin's gone forever.
Josh Keaton's voicing of the role is immaculate in delivery, and the show was set to be a top marker. But the 5-season plan was thwarted when Disney got the rights to Marvel. The animation series got cancelled after just 2 seasons, leaving fans devastated with a major cliffhanger. If the series had continued even a little bit further, then this version may have been a strong contender for the top spot. Unfortunately, the show came to its abrupt end, and fans were left to deal with their conflicting feelings. 2. SpiderMan Into the SpiderVerse, 2018. In this animated version of Spider-Man, Marvel might have well said, diversity? Yes, all of it. The first black Spider-Man, Miles Morales, who is voiced by Shameik Moore, must unite with other superheroes with spider abilities to defeat their common threat. As ridiculous as the name may seem, it is totally fitting to the setting of the movie, as we are introduced to different spider folks in the SpiderVerse.
My name is Peter Parker.
My name is Penny Parker.
My name is Peter Porker. I was bitten by a radioactive pig.
The animation is absolutely on point. The writing is fast-paced, and the delivery is exciting from start to finish. Voice acting was definitely taken to new heights in this movie, with talented performances from the cast. This version of Spider-Man depicts the true meaning of what it means to be Spider-Man, bearing vulnerability and sharing strength.
How do I know I'm not gonna mess it up again?
You won't.
Right. Hate to leap of faith.
A truly phenomenal animation in every way. We have to applaud the production and talent behind this version of Spider-Man. While we hope for a live-action version, we are very delighted with our choice of second best Spider-Man. But before we announce the top choice, honorable mention, Ultimate Spider-Man. We couldn't really find a place to fit this in the rankings, but it is worth mentioning that this is the first animated show version of Spider-Man that was produced by Marvel Cinematic Universe. As much potential as this show had, the humor overran, and people couldn't really connect the voice of Drake Bell to the character of Spider-Man.
Good evening, Miss Watson. I hear you've been looking for me.
Peter, what are you doing in that silly costume? And what's up with that stupid voice?
Don't!
So, when it got cancelled in 2017, there weren't a lot of broken hearts. Now for the Director's Choice top version of Spider-Man across the years. Number 1. Spider-Man the Animated Series, 1994 to 1998. The most remarkable animated version of Spider-Man, with special regards to Christopher Daniel Barnes, who voiced the superhero. His performance truly brought Spider-Man to life, and contributed to the massive following which the animated series still maintains.
I just won't be home for lunch.
But Peter, I've invited Anna Watson's niece, Mary Jane.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I forgot. I can't make it home right now. The traffic, it's terrible. In fact, it's really crawling.
The quality of animation and production in this show may have been limited to the time of its release, but it still shone through as a very exceptional cinematic work. For people who have been long-standing fans of the Spider-Man series, this is definitely the most nostalgic version they have watched, with good reason too. And that wraps it up. Spider-Man's character has been through a lot of changes with a few fails since he first aired on animated TV shows, but it is a delight to watch the progress. From the storyline development to casting and production, there has been significant development in the quality of the movies and animated shows. We are excited to see what else Marvel Cinematic Universe has in store for us with Spider-Man's characters and missions. Thanks for watching. Take a look at this other recent clip by Director's Choice and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified with our latest videos.